Greetings and salutations. Today I want to have a look at several photos with y'all and walk through editing two of them. The first set is of a female cardinal, and the second set is of a nesting dove. So let's have a look at that cardinal. So this cardinal has been coming around the side yard for a few days, and what stuck out to me is the fact that she's bald from about here up. And it took a few days, maybe a week of searching online, just kind of thinking about it, like what's going on with her. Sometimes all the feathers on a cardinal's head just molt all at once. You can't explain that. At first I thought she was a fledgling, but her motor control was too fine, and then I thought maybe she'd been through some sort of trauma. No, she acted fine, seemed fine from my observations. She was probably just molting. So female cardinals stick out more to me, not in a literal sense, in a figurative sense, because they are harder to pick out. Most people have seen a cardinal have probably seen a male cardinal. It's because male cardinals are bright, they're red, they're easy to be seen. The female cardinals, they tend to have woody plumage. There's a lot of gray, a lot of brown in the plumage, and they blend in really well in their natural environment. You know, woodlands, forests. About what sticks out the most for a female cardinal is that bright red beak. So this is the cardinal hanging around the tree ring and just enjoying the seed. As far as I know, she's still coming around, and I might just not recognize her. So here we have the set of photos I want to look at and consider for editing. The photos of her inside the tree ring just don't interest me a whole lot. I want a photo of her where it looks like it's closer, more akin to her natural environment. In this series of photos here, you can't really tell that she's in someone's side yard. Not easily anyways. So again, because one of the reasons she stuck out to me is because of that baldness of her head. I want to pick one of the photos where that can be seen. I don't think we'll edit this one because there's too much shadow being cast from the sun on her shoulder. This was probably about 11:30 a.m. so the sun was pretty high, and the leaves were catching and reflecting a lot of that light. You can kind of see the white tinge they have here on the right. And on this one, the way she's looking away, you can't really tell that she's bald unless you get up really close. This is the photo I want to walk through editing with y'all. We have a good profile of the cardinal. You can see the different colors in her feathers. And you can kind of see what's going on with her plumage, with the feathers around her head. So this photo was shot using a Canon EOS 5D Mark IV with a 70-200mm lens and a 2x extender, so 400 millimeters. It was shot about 1/1200th of a second, aperture 7.1, and at an ISO of 1600. In an ideal scenario, I'd have used a crop sensor body that would have given me an equivalent focal length of about 640 millimeters. It would have meant I could have stayed where I was and filled the frame more with the cardinal, captured more detail about her, instead of having to, the way it is now, having to go in and crop the image quite a bit to get rid of a lot of superfluous information on the periphery. You know, just gray, green, brown pixels. So I'm editing this image in Lightroom Mobile today, and where I generally like to start is the optics and geometry sections. And about 98% of the time, I tick remove chromatic aberration. And about 87% of the time, I tick enable lens correction. Now, the geometry section we don't have to worry about with this photo. There's nothing in the photo to show a skewed horizon or that the photo is off angle. So I'm not even going to touch that section today. Next, I'm going to go to the profile section, and I'm going to tick Modern 3. It's a profile I really like, and it's a profile I've been using on a lot of photos lately. I can't really explain what it is. It's just the aesthetics of that profile that I really like. Next, we'll hit up the color section, and I like to hit auto for the white balance, and that normally gets me pretty close to where I want it to be. But for this one, we're going to warm it up just a little bit. Next, I'll hit up the light section, and I'm going to tick auto. Most of the time, Lightroom gets it there 90% of the way, and it's that last 10% where you want to play with the sliders and see where you want to get that image. So for this one, because there's a shadow underneath her that I want to kind of take out, I'm going to bring the shadows up just a bit. So I'm going to bring the highlights down and the whites down just a little bit, because I'm trying to deal with that white tinge that gets on those leaves. And I'm going to bring the contrast up, and I'm going to increase the exposure by probably about 1/4 of a stop. Next, I'm going to move on to the effects section, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity. And because this image was shot at a high ISO, I'm going to add some noise reduction, probably about 20 to 40%. And we'll zoom in and see what that does. So that's at 20%, and we're gonna remove that. We'll zoom in a little more. So you can see just a little bit of noise, and you know, most people, they're not gonna zoom in or even be able to zoom in this close to inspect it. But just for our sake, we're going to add a little bit of noise reduction. So you see what the noise reduction does there is it helps establish the separation in this photo that we had between the subject and the background. It just helps it establish it just a little bit more. Let's see what happens when we bring it up to 40%. And see that high, when we go that high, we're just losing a little bit of detail, and we don't want to lose any more detail than we have to. So I'm going to try to get it to 20%. So this is one of the things I don't care about for Lightroom Mobile is you can't key in specific values, and so you have to rely on the slider. There's a nice organic feel to using the slider that way, but a lot of times I would very much rather prefer to key in a specific value. Now we're going to play with the crop a little bit, and what I'm going to use is the 5:4 aspect ratio. It's an aspect ratio I've been using a lot lately, and it's a great aspect ratio for printing. I don't think this image would print very well much larger than 5:4 because we are cropping it so much. We're losing a lot of detail, and if we printed it, say 8:10 or 16:20, 20:16, 10:8, you would see a lot of the imperfections if you printed it that large. I'm going to position the Cardinal's head roughly center. We have some leading lines bringing us to the Cardinal. The Cardinal's body has leading lines, the flight feathers and the wing feathers bringing us to her head. And her head is what attracted me to her to begin with. So that's kind of what I want to draw eyes to. The composition is simple, so we don't have to worry too much about other distracting elements taking away from bringing us to the subject. So I like where this crop is. Let's hit done. I'm going to go back to the effects section. I'm going to add a little bit of negative vignette. This is going to be the shadowed vignette. And a little bit of vignette goes a long way. I'm going to decrease the midpoint. And we're going to increase the roundness. And we're going to increase the feather. So you could go extreme with the vignette, you could go extreme with any of these edits, but what I found is that subtle light edits compound and they go a lot further to producing a decent image than, say, going extreme with one way or the other. With that done, I want to go back to the color section, and I'm going to hit up the color mix. I'm going to take the color picker tool, and I'm going to decrease the luminance and saturation of the leaves just a hair. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the Cardinal. I'm going to increase it though. I'm going to increase the saturation and luminance of some of her features. And this is just to get her to stand out a little more. and a little goes a long way. So that's the Cardinal photo done. As it is now, I might just leave it and let it set for a little bit, for a few days, and revisit it and see if there might be anything I want to change. So now to move on to the dove photo. Positionally, this dove is nesting in a tree line behind the Cardinal, and the nest is probably about head height on me, and I'm about 6'1", 6'2". She, at this point, might be regretting nesting where she nested because there's a lot of foot traffic underneath her nest. There's a sidewalk there. I used the same camera, the same lens to shoot this, and I tried to remain a respectful distance while still getting close enough to get her decently in frame. And the photo I want to edit is one of the ones where she's tucked into the nest, kind of hidden behind a leaf. It establishes a great context to what's going on with her. And you can tell she's been keeping an eye on me. I must look kind of sus to her. This is the photo of the dove that I want to edit, and it's because it has, to me, a pretty good context to what's going on with her at the time. She's nesting. You can still make out the nest in the foreground. She's hidden behind a leaf. It kind of shows that she's a little vulnerable while she's nesting. And she's keeping an eye on me. I must look pretty sus to her. So again, I'm going to go in and start with the optics panel. We don't have to worry about geometry for the same reasons as the Cardinal. We'll apply the Modern 3 profile. And we're going to hit up the white balance and hit auto. And just like the last one, I want to warm it up just a wee bit. Next, we're going to hit up the light panel. We're going to hit auto again, and we're going to just make some slight adjustments. Let's see what happens with the blacks. We're going to take them down a bit and up a bit. I think I liked it when they were up a little bit. And the shadows, I think I want to bring those up a little bit. Yeah. So this is one of the things you do when you're editing photos. You just play with the sliders and see what happens. Sometimes you know which direction you want to take them. Sometimes you have to play with them and see where they go. So I think I want the highlights down. And we'll leave the whites where they're at. And we're going to bring the contrast up. And we're going to bring up the exposure just a bit. Next, we'll go to the effects panel. And we'll add a little bit of texture. And a little bit of clarity. And we're going to go to the detail section. And we're going to add a little bit of noise reduction. Not as much though. And now we'll go to the crop. Going to do 5x4 again. And we're going to play with it a little bit. We're going to bring it down. Don't need to crop this one as much. And her eye is really the focus. And I think I wanted it on that upper rule of thirds line. So this way, with her eye on the upper rule of thirds line, we still have a little bit of space above her head, but not too much. And we still have a lot of that context I was talking about underneath her. We're going to go back to the effects section and we're going to add a little bit of vignette again. A little bit of negative vignette. decrease the midpoint a little bit. Gonna increase the roundness, increase the feather. And that's it for effects. And I want to go back to the color section again. So what I want to do is I just want to make that blue in her eye pop a little more. So we're going to hit the color mix, hit the color picker tool, select luminance, and we're just going to bring up the values around her eyes just a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing for saturation. We're going to go into the individual colors and adjust the values just a little bit. And I think that's good where it's at. I like that. And that's my editing process for at least 2 photos. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts, comments, or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week.